Welcome to the lesson on Java reference types, part 1. There are various constructs that are reference types. The most popular reference type that we will talk about is the class. We will first cover the very basics of a class in this video and defer more advanced concepts of classes to other videos. At the very minimum, you need to use the keyword class followed by the name of the class. The name of the class has to either start with a letter, lower or uppercase, or can start with a $sign. After that, you can use any letter, number, or $sign. After giving your class a name, you then need to put an open curly brace and a corresponding closing curly brace. So let's create our class, and let's call it employee. Notice how the class signature at line 7 starts with the keyword class and has a class name, and then has an open curly brace and a corresponding closing curly brace. As is, this class is valid. Every class in Java inherits the object class, which means that this empty class has features in it such as a method called toString. However, we want our class to have some specified features in it beyond the class signature. There are two main parts: properties, sometimes referred to as attributes or fields, and there are methods, sometimes referred to as functions, procedures, or routines. It's good practice to put these comments in there, especially for those of you who are first learning about classes. So when you start to construct your class, you have to think about what the properties of the class are and what the methods are. For an employee, we could have a string name, and let's add another property called pay rate. Of course, you could add a lot more properties to this ID and so forth and so on. For a method, let's add a method called computeMySalary. And in order to construct a method, at line 14, the first word is a double, which is the return type of the method, followed by a name, computeMySalary, followed by two open parentheses and a closing parentheses, and then there's an open curly brace and a corresponding closing curly brace. So let's now implement this method by arbitrarily adding some code. So we'll have a variable named base, type double, and we'll assign 50,000 to it. And we'll return base plus pay rate times base. Okay, at this point, we have now created our class. Now we want to use the class. Oftentimes I'm asked by students how, after they created the class, how do they use a class? And to use a class, you can set up another class. We'll call it test employee. And in this class, we want to add the main method in it. So that we can execute this program. We are now going to declare an employee type and call the reference variable employee. We will next instantiate this employee by referring this variable to an employee object. After declaring the type employee and instantiating it, we will now start using it. To start using a reference variable, you can type the variable name followed by a dot, and notice how all of these features come up. Let's select the pay rate, and assign an arbitrary value, 0.55 to it, and then compute the salary by calling the compute my salary method. Let's assign it to a double variable called salary, and let's display it as output. And notice the value is 75,500. So what did we do? Just to recap real quick, we created an employee class over here. We gave it two properties, a name and a pay rate. We also gave it a method called compute my salary. We implemented that method with these two lines at lines 15 and 16. We then created another class called test employee, which uses the employee class. And at line 11, we set up a variable called employee, which is a type employee, capital E. We then instantiate this variable to point to an object of employee. We then assign a value 0.55 to the pay rate property of this employee reference type. We then call the compute my salary method on this employee reference type and assign a return value to the variable called salary. And then at line 15 we finally output that value. Just a few other notes to keep in mind when you talk about reference types and classes and objects. Objects are instances of classes in memory, and variables point to or reference these objects. This concludes our video on Java reference types, part 1.